Alright, good morning. Sorry that the countdown started a bit late there. I missed the box that tells YouTube to start the live stream as soon as it starts receiving data. So it was about 2 minutes before I figured out how to start it manually ahead of time. Right. So today I'm going to be working on some couple of generic or general scripts specifically for these streams, rather than being a project in and of themselves. The two main things I want to hit are a custom prompt for Visual Studio Code and a music ticker, and if we have some time to work on some, or at least work on my first Visual Studio, my first code task for getting some things automated. That countdown was the original script that inspired Jeff's new one. So I think the first thing we'll do is work on prompts. Now the reason I want to set up a custom prompt is mainly because of when I'm streaming, I do it in 720p, so my screen real estate's already a lot smaller than what I'm used to. And then on top of that, I blow up the zoom level a little bit to make things easier to see on YouTube, but it then reduces the amount of stuff I can see on screen. The net result of that is the default prompt, by the time I start getting to type anything, is all the way over here. I can make it a bit easier by hiding that, but still that's a lot of space wasted just showing me the path I'm in, which is generally the folder for the project that I'm working on. So we're going to set up a profile. First, probably pays to help to check. I've currently got enable profile loading turned off, so let's turn that on. And let's double check if I have any profiles already. And it turns out I do, and now I remember what I put in there. Let me quickly change that key just in case. Okay, good morning. So I do have a profile. Oh, I've got some old stuff in there. So I've got a profile which has my old gallery key in it for the PowerShell gallery. And I've also got an ISE profile which is just starting ISE steroids, which is alright. So in VS Code I'm setting profile loading to true, and like this profile that's for the PowerShell ISE, there's also a profile for VS Code, which is not that one. It is, if I open up something ending in PS1 and load the integrated console, if I can learn to type in the morning, which is this .vs code. Right, so let's actually will VS Code just open that? Yay! Okay. So what we're going to have in this profile is basically our custom prompt, and the goal of this is going to be to shorten these paths. So I still want to have an indication of how deep into the file system I am, so I'm not just going to truncate it to the folder name and call it a day. What I'm thinking is I still want to see PS, I want to see the drive I'm on, but then if I'm more than a folder deep, I'm going to replace the words for each folder with a period. So for example, that there would end up being something like, and of course the terminal itself isn't a very good editor. Yeah, put my fingers in the right place. So I'm thinking just replacing them with a period, so they'll get the prompt will end up getting shortened to that. Still see the drive I'm on, still see the folder I'm in, but the other folders in between there are shortened. So to do that, we'll define our prompt. The first thing we're obviously going to need is our current location. And I'm probably going to be a little bit more verbose than I need to be in here, but it shouldn't slow things down much. So I'm using the get location command lit, but I only need to know the path. And for the sake of making things easier, I will split that location on the backslash. Now one thing to note is if you were to run this while you're on the oh yeah, that's a good point. This is a built-in function, so the return from this is what controls your prompt, basically. Now, one oddity about this, well, it's not an oddity, but if you split when you're on the root of the file system, so let's go down there. So we're at the root of my C drive. If we run these, you'll notice it returns 2. Basically, there's an empty string in there. So that is the same as if I were to go, do I have a temp? No. So I'm just going to put in some logic there to throw out that empty, well, put in some logic. I'm just going to say I don't want that empty string. So, if my current location is on the C drive or only one folder deep, that is just going to be returned as it is. I don't need to shorten anything. So let's test for how many folders are in that split location variable. So basically, if there's two or less things in split location, we're just going to go straight and give current location. If that's not the case, we're going to start that print location by putting the root on there, which happens to be the first item in that split location array. Then we're going to do a very quick loop. And we're going to be adding print location. So what we're basically doing there is for any split location that's not the root or the leaf directory, we're going to be adding a backslash and a period to our print location. And then finally, we'll add the leaf in, which is the last item in the list. Then we'll wrap this all up. Still want the PS in there. We'll add the print location, end it with a square bracket and a space. So in theory, well, let's run this and see if it works. So that still looks the same there, but if we go to let's actually so I've done something wrong. Let's quickly see. Have I mistyped something? Actually, let's double check that I've put this in the right place. while profile loading is on. Alright, note to self, don't copy and paste that in there. So can anybody see now? I'm curious if this would work in the ISE and if I'm just running into something weird in VS Code. So let's wait for steroids to start. Come on. Alright, so I have fundamentally stuffed something up there. Right, let's go back into this and have a look. Chances are I've potentially misspelt something. Or I've created a loop. There we go. All of that, one missing character. I sort of, well, actually, let's not count my chickens before they've hatched. I wonder if I'm mucking that up. Oh. If that was it, I didn't learn my lesson last time. I skipped the coffee this morning. That looks like it's working. To an extent. Let's go back in here and fix it in here. So, that's meant to be where it doesn't equal empty. There we go. Now it's working when I actually type properly. So you'll see the amount of periods are growing as I get deeper here. If I go back to root, and if I go one folder deep, That saves a lot of space. So something that I will look at doing in the future is something that's a little bit more contextual, and I'll be borrowing heavily from this. So what this is doing is basically giving, basically applying aliases to specific folders. So you notice when they go to desktop, the prompt says desktop, and it's just a hash table, effectively, of locations with shortened names for them, which is a really nice way to do it. But I just wanted to do something quick and dirty in the meantime. So that's our VS Code profile set up, and let's make sure that it actually loads. Cool. Good morning. So that's our prompt done. Now I want to have a look at a music ticker. So on stream at the moment, you'll see the revolving text down the bottom here telling you the artist, the track name, and the album that's currently playing. I want to get that up the top of my editor here. Now, if I was using something like the ISE, I would do something like host UI, raw UI, window title equals stuff. You can see it's changed up the top there. Now, I can't do it directly like that in VS Code. However, it is customizable via my settings file, and that there is if I type properly. Where's it hidden? Yeah, just window.title. Cool. And you'll see that is the default there. So dirty, you'll hardly ever see the dirty indicator because my settings are set to autosave everything. And the file I'm working on, the root of what I'm working on, which at the moment I've got default property setter open, and the name of the app, which of course is Visual Studio Code. Now, one thing I want is to actually shorten that Visual Studio Code down to VS Code, and you'll notice as soon as this saves, it updates up the top there. So what I'm going to do is basically edit this file to show what the current music track is. How I'll do that is basically by borrowing the text file that VS Code is using. So to play music, I'm using Foobar 2000. And in there I've got a plugin called Now Playing Simple, which is basically just dumping things to text. So if I have a look in that text file, hopefully with something that doesn't lock it, we should see when it changes track, hopefully. Yep, so the file's been modified and it's got the new track information in there. So we're going to be basically watching this folder for any file for any changes, and writing the contents up top. So we're going to need two files. This one here, sitting in my roaming foobar 2000 folder. We're also going to need my user settings, which also in my roaming app data. Nice and simple. And the good thing about the settings file is it's JSON, which PowerShell can read in as a object, and makes it really easy to edit it. So I'll work on this as another file outside of my profile, and then we'll chuck the contents into my profile when we're done. PowerShell. Yep, so if I type right, so the folder for that music is here, and the file specifically that we're watching is called nowplaying.txt. So the reason why I split it out like that is because we'll be using a file watcher .NET object, and the two things it's going to ask for is a path and a filter, which you could make it watch all log files in a folder, but we're going to tell it to watch specifically this one text file. So let's set up our watcher. We'll whip up a new one of those, and I will quickly hit F8 on all of that so we get all the nice and tally cents. So, watcher. So, just telling it the path is that folder, the filter is that file. Just so it doesn't spend its time trying to look through the rest of the file system, even though it's only got a couple of subfolders there. We'll tell it not to include subdirectories. And because we're only interested in changes to this file, I'm going to limit what it's notifying on to just last write. So it's only going to be watching the last write attribute of that file. And I believe notify filter. I think that's the right syntax for that. Right, that is a plural. Cool. That's what I was looking for. Now we need to define, so basically what's going to happen here is we're going to be registering an event. So PowerShell will be watching that file, and whenever that file is changed or modified, for if you want to use that term, it's going to trigger off a script block, which we're about to write here. So we're going to need to know, well, first of all, we're going to need our code settings. And again, I'm going to be a bit more verbose about this than I need to be, so I'll say get content. And I know this is in code, user, I believe. Yep, and it's settings.json. So if we run that now, and look at code settings, what we'll see is an object. It's a PS custom object with a bunch of note properties in it. But we can call specific ones like, what was it, window title. So, in order to edit the window title up the top there, all we have to do is edit this. Now, what I'm going to do to make things a bit easier as far as getting back to my default state is I'm going to grab a copy of what I want it to go back to when I'm not showing any music information. So the default title is that. And now playing is, we've already got that information up top. It is folder, not path, folder file. Let's just double check that that's working. So, Ragamuffin, and that is what's currently playing. So, we've got the information that we need there. One thing to note with this file here is if we stop playing something, it becomes empty. And if I start playing it again, it fills it back in. So there's a possible state here where we get nothing from get content, and if that's the case, I want my default title put back. So what we'll do for that is basically check the length of now playing. If it's greater than, if it's greater than that, we will do some stuff, and if it's not greater than that, meaning it is 0, we will set our title equal to our default title. Now if it is playing, we're still going to use our default title, because this is going to save us doing any string manipulation and replacing the previous one with the new one or anything like that. We'll preface it with music. So in theory, if we look at just that, helps if I actually have that in memory. So we'll see there'll be a space, then a dash, music, and the information there. Cool. And then we need to actually write our settings.json file back to disk. So we'll grab our code settings object and convert it back to JSON. And I'll pass through path. And we'll write it back to disk. So if we were to run this manually now, what we should see is the music information pop up top there. So the only thing left to do here then is register the event. So I will assign this to watcher event. By assigning it to a variable, it means I can unregister it in the future if I need to. And this is an object event. So the input object on this event is my my watcher. The event I'm looking for is changed. So the other options there are things like created, removed, I believe. Yeah, there's some other ones, but they're not things like modified, which can trip you up. The source identifier, just to be very verbose about it so that we don't get more events than we need, is file changed. And our action is this script block that we defined up here, which is watcher action. So if we run all of that, let's have a look at this in action. So if we were to pause playback, you notice the title up the top here is back to my default setting. If I play, and we're right at the end of the track. If I skip to the next one, skip to the next one, pause, play. Cool. That looks like it's working to me. So now we need to see if that works within our profile. So I'm gonna because it's not in a function or anything, I'm going to wrap all of that in a region comment so I can fold it up if I need to. And let's see. First of all, I will gracefully unregister that command, that event. And with, just to make sure that's actually working. Cool, so I've turned off the event, which means it's no longer updating that. If I reload my session, it should load my profile again, and it should start updating that. Cool. And that means the event being created within my profile is working as intended. So I think, given that that's up there, I might turn off the one that's down here. Let's do that, if I can figure out OBS. Cool. Cool, so that's served its purpose. Let's get rid of that. So the other thing we could have done is we can, well, there's two things we could technically do. And actually, now that I mention it, I sort of want that back. The other thing that I could do is it's possible to chuck something down here in the status bar. It's also possible to pop up a big information bar, like when you've installed a extension. Now I'm not going to do that, but I'll quickly show it on here. So just checking we've got something in now playing. We do. So when you've got the excuse me, when you've got the PowerShell plugin installed, you'll have this PS editor object, and I believe, so I'll have it in the integrated console. Yeah, but what you'll find is I don't have it in the host. So that's because it's part of the PowerShell extension for VS Code. So just be aware of that. But it exposes a bunch of things about the editor, such as set status bar message, puts it down the bottom there. And let's clear it. The other option that you might have seen pop up there was, well, there's three of them: show warning message, show information, and show error. So show information message Now playing. You notice pops up across the top there. I've always been too impatient to test this, but the thing either stays up there for a really long time or it stays there literally until you dismiss it. So it's a bit too intrusive for this sort of thing, so I'm happy with it just being up in the title. Yeah, toast is another option. Might look at doing that as part of, basically my next stream on Thursday will be an introduction to toasts and the burnt toast module. So we can probably do that as an example there. So the last thing I'm going to work on today is I'm going to play around with tasks in Visual Studio Code, mainly to stop myself from what I have been doing, which is manually copy-pasting my module from my GitHub repo over to my modules location in my documents folder. So in order to do that, I'm going to do effectively a janky build script, and we'll wire up a build task within Visual Studio Code to handle basically all it'll do is delete that, copy a fresh copy over to it from my working directory. Now I believe I'm already in default property setter, good. Which just happens to be the one I want to use to test. I can get rid of those now that I don't need them. Cool. So the first thing I'm going to do is, actually that is the wrong folder for what I want to be in. Let's go down a level. So I'm working out of the root folder for this project. Close everything up so I can see my GitHub Readme, my git ignore file, all of that sort of stuff. I'm going to do is create in the base there, even though it's probably not the best place for it, it's nice and easy for me to get to and remember that it's there. I'm going to create a build.ps1 file. So this file, given that it runs here, I will just for now, I'm going to hard code this in. Just in the interest of getting this across the line, and then we can revisit it in the future. I'm also going to hard code in my user module path. Which is not profile, module. Why am I duping on this? path. That's what I'm after. So I'm going to hardcode in that for now. Now the reason why I'm using my module path rather than, say, program files or System32 or anything is I want this to work whether or not I'm running with elevated privileges. So if it was in program files or if it was in System32, it would likely require UAC elevation, which I don't want to deal with. And it's also where I tend to put these modules when I'm actively working on them anyway, so makes sense to me anyway. So the first thing I'm going to do is basically I'm going to be really brutal about this. I'm going to check if it's installed. If it is installed, I'm going to just delete that folder outright, and then I'm going to chuck the new file, chuck the folder in there out of my GitHub directory. So to check if it's installed, we'll use get module, name being module name, and list available. So at the moment, you can see it's returning something because it's currently sitting there in that folder. So if installed, let's go ahead and remove it. So module base, if I remember correctly, gives us that. Is actually interesting. So I've installed this module from the gallery. Which actually that still works. Because if I delete that and I replace it, it's just going to move everything up a level. Let's leave it as is and see if how I thought this through will still work. So remove that. We need to recurse, because otherwise it'll complain a lot. So if we run that, that's what I was trying to avoid. Let's see if adding a force on that works. Alright, that'll do then. So now I've got an empty folder here. If, oh yeah, that'll work. So now that we've removed the existing install, we need to copy over copy the module over from my working directory in my GitHub directory over to the module path. So we're copying it from basically with build being where it is, its PS script root is this directory here, so I can reference that directory directly above it. So module name, it is a container. I do want everything inside, and its destination is the user module path. Cool. So that file now is not sitting there. It's sitting in the root of my project folder just above GitHub. Now let's wire up a task real quick. Let's configure a task, create a file on that. Cool. So what that's created for us is a tasks.json file within the .vs Code folder, which should now be visible within my project. So it's filled out the shell for us, but most of that we won't actually use. So I'm going to specifically tell it if I can spell properly. I don't trust myself, so I'm going to quickly Google that word and make sure it's right. Nobody saw anything. So, we're going to tell it specifically that we want to run PowerShell.exe for this. The args we'll be passing into that is no profile, execution policy, bypass, so full disclosure, this section here I got from a it's a mixture of the help documentation and an issue that was on the VS Code, well no, the PowerShell extension for VS Code's GitHub repo, one of the issues that were on there. My task is actually mainly from one of the built-in build tasks, which I was having a peek at last night. So our label is going to be build. The type is still shell, and our command isn't echo hello. It is, so this command is basically passed in as the last argument against that dash command. So this is effectively as if you were running PowerShell from here, and you run and you put in your no profile, so you don't want it to load your profile, and you tell it to bypass the execution policy and blah blah blah. So that's build. Our command is so that's the directory of the project, and we've got our build.ps1 file sitting there, and that needs to be escaped. finally, this is my default build task for this project. So, in theory now, if I look at tasks, you'll see run build task with Control-Shift-B as my, as the default keyboard shortcut for it. If I run that, and if I've done everything properly, that is something I hadn't considered. Will that still work if I force it? So what you'll notice there was no output other than telling me press a key to close this terminal. If we go and look here, you'll see this folder used to be empty. It's now got the contents of that one. It's now got the contents of this folder. So if I were to go on here and say, for whatever reason, add an access database. If we go and run this build task now, we should see it pop up here. Now that means if I am in VS Code, I make some changes to my PSD1 file, say I up the version. Alright, that's a nice and simple change. And I want to test my changes. What I would normally do is go in here, delete this, copy it over, waste about a minute every time, and potentially stuff it up. Instead of doing that, I can press Control-Shift-B, runs my build task, and now if I look in here, I should see, just close that so it doesn't keep prompting me, that it's been updated. So what I could also do on the back of that is reset my session and re-import the module. But I won't go that far today. So, just to show those two components again, that is the build script that I ended up writing. Very basic, because frankly the task it's fulfilling for me is a really basic one. So, yep, literally all it's doing, checking to see if the module's installed. If it's installed, it deletes it, and then it'll copy in a new copy from my GitHub directory, which happens to be what I have loaded in the ISE. My tasks.json file is what tells VS Code what to run, specifically that build.ps1 file, when I go ahead and run my build task. And that tasks.json file lives in my VS Code settings for that workspace. So if I'm wiring this up for another project, what I need to do is basically copy my VS Code file, copy my build.ps1 and update it until I make that a little bit more smart. And then it'll just work. So let's grab a copy of both of those and my profile, and let's get them up on GitHub. actually, to remind myself to put it in .vs Code. Let's do it like that. And my VS Code profile, done. So the link to where I just pushed this is in the video description. Hopefully it actually works. Which it looks like it does. So, geez, we got through that a lot quicker than I expected to. So I'm going to take the opportunity to head back to bed. We're going for just over an hour. Yeah, awesome. So thanks guys for tuning in today. My next stream will be Thursday, where I'll be looking at my burnt toast module, how that works, the basics of what toasts are as a concept. There probably won't be, well, in fact, there won't be any actual development of it. It's more going to be a tutorial. But we'll use that as the springboard for starting to work on the next version. I just feel like it's a good idea to give an intro to the module. Yeah, good call. I was planning on doing it during the stream warm-up today, but I mucked up a setting and I had to quickly figure out how to manually turn on a stream. So yeah, that was fun. Yeah, anyway, so thanks guys for tuning in. See you next time. Feel free to hit me up on Twitter if you've got any requests or suggestions or criticism or anything. Happy to have a chat. And I'll see you next time. Enjoy your day, evening, morning, whatever it is for you guys. See you later.